Good morning, Misfits. This is episode 2 of the Unprepared Podcast by Misfit Athletics. On this show, I think of a topic before the show, and I don't tell either of these guys.
Fair.
And the goal of that is to have a
Wait, what?
real conversation. No computers, no notes, no studies, no none of that.
I tried to bring my computer. I tried.
You did. We just shut him down.
Those
I don't know what you would have been doing. I
purposes,
don't think
though.
anyone wants to know what you would have been doing.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Sharpen the Axe. SharpenTheAxeCo.com for all your fancy, cool gear needs. Use the code UNPREPARED if you can spell it and get 10% off.
That's a prerequisite.
Spell check.
Are you ready?
Let's go.
The topic of the day is ego.
Yuck. I have one. What you got for us, Hunter?
Any specific?
Oh, geez, you're going to do this again. 2 weeks in a row, I try to throw one over to him. I try to just hand him, he can say anything he wants about ego. I think this is an important topic because, I'll give you a little pretense here, because of the connotations that are associated with it, both good, bad, and indifferent. And I think it's important to talk about what we think this means and how we can use it or how it can be a serious issue when it comes to, we don't even need to be talking about training. We could be talking about anything.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in our community have read books. Ego is the enemy, obstacle is the way. That those sort of like mindset books and whatnot. But to me, you have to have an important balance between kind of checking your ego and also knowing when to kind of have confidence and try to kind of puff your chest out to accomplish something. Like in training, I guess we'll start with the training topic, but in training, it's important to kind of check that ego, be willing to take a couple steps back in order to take, 5 steps forward. But when it comes to competing, I think there's a fine line between respecting your competition, but also having a psychological, kind of advantage over your opponent by kind of trying to puff your chest out, exude a higher level of confidence than maybe you have, but just demonstrating that you are confident and prepared to tackle whatever's coming your way. I think there's got to be a balance of both.
I think you gain an edge by having a little bit of an ego, at least early on. I mean, a lot of us that started, again, going with the training aspect with, yeah, I can do that, or yeah, I'm going to try that. And that type of attitude, that can-do attitude is something that's really important early on when you're trying to establish, yourself in this aspect, training. Yeah, I'll try to do those bar muscle-ups, or I'll try to lift that heavy weight. And it ends up being something that encourages them or gives them a motivation to do something. The only time that becomes poisonous is when that becomes the only measure of worth. And that's something that, one of the topics we have at our training camps is, and that's what I talk about, is how your ego can be a detractor in training and how it affects your ability to see clearly the end goal, which in our case is, proving yourself in the fitness test grounds. But it needs to be there early on so that you have that drive or that ambition to be really, really good. Then once you have that drive, realizing that there are certain things to be taken away from what you're doing, and that sometimes you can get lost in the forest, the trees. You know what I mean? You look around thinking oh, I'm great, and this is the only way I can measure myself is by having this best score, this best weight. But are you working on something that's important or allows you to grow as a person, athlete, whatever the context is?
Yeah, and I think in order to grow and develop in anything, you have to be willing to accept that you are not the best at something. I feel confident that we at Misfit Athletics are certainly arguably the most knowledgeable people in the sport, but I know for myself, I don't use that as an excuse to not learn from other people, other leaders in the sport, other books, authors, whatever. To me, if you're not taking the opportunity to learn from somebody else, whether you think they know more than you or not, you're missing out big time. And that, to me, that's an indicator of an ego that's a little bit too big. If you're not willing to learn from somebody who knows maybe even less than you, but still listen, you could probably still gain something from those people.
You value those conversations with people that have different experience and different backgrounds, because they might say something in a way that, oh yeah, that sounds very basic, but it's explained in a very concise and clear way that other people can then relate to, for example.
Right.
Like, I just think about coaching, like you said, I might be considered a well-respected member of the community in terms of the coaching aspect. That doesn't mean I can't learn a very basic cue for, someone that's very new to CrossFit or very new to training, and imply that to them. Be like, hey, listen, like, it's something as simple as, like, I want you to be able to squat down, stand back up, and you don't need to go super technical, like external rotation, this, and this. And it does play a way into, like, hey, it's important to see it from varying angles, and being humble enough to realize that, yeah, it's great you have knowledge, but you shouldn't just be like, yeah, I'm good. There's never a point where good enough. That's like something that's really important to me, is that, like, good enough is not good enough. Like, you should always be willing to keep
that's
trying.
a journey that you go on as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a level of maturity there that says, you get into a space, and I think our space is very unique in that, specifically like when Seth and I were starting, when we dug into these other modalities and sort of went outside of the CrossFit community to come back into it to teach, I think we were finding stuff that not a lot of people had talked about at that point. But this information isn't secret. It was just more like it wasn't part of our community yet. And if we had held on to the, like, we know and you don't know thing for too long, I think it would have been a massive issue. So it's one of those things where I think it was probably good that I started in a field where I needed an ego. I needed a 22, 23-year-old's ego to be able to jump in and say, like, there aren't really subject matter experts here that are bringing all this stuff together. Like, I bet I could be one. Like, that part of the ego makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
But then now I'm getting older, and I need to have the skill to do almost the exact opposite and be like, I got to go out and get more information. I got to go out there and figure out all these things. And to me, you guys brought in the coaching example, both coaches and athletes. I want to know when and where their ego shows up. Like, if an ego is, like, big and boastful in these really safe spaces, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's very confusing when an ego comes out when you're not really being challenged at all.
This is weird, but, like, instantly in my mind, it became into, like, Jell-O. And I'm going to explain what I mean by this. When you put Jell-O in the fridge, it's, like, not set. And it's kind of like your ego early on. You have this, like,
fucking love Jell-O, don't you, fat boy?
you have this, like, thing that's not set yet. And as you grow, it solidifies, or in the fridge, it solidifies. And all of a sudden you have that and you go, all right, well, it's good that I have all this information and I've built up this, like, character, this identity. But then you have to be willing to then deconstruct. And it reminds me of something as simple as, like, once you feel like you mastered the high level
pour
stuff,
on another layer of Jell-O.
Yeah, you, like,
so you're, like,
rainbow
hard
Jell-O
on the bottom, but then
so, like, you have this opportunity where you've now established this identity that is, hey, I'm this athlete, I'm this coach, I'm this person, and then you can go, all right, well, in order to grow, like, I have to be willing to look at this from other people's perspectives and look at ways to communicate better, and, delve into the things that I'm good at and the things I'm not good at, and realize that this ego or this identity plays into both, and figuring out, all right, well, we're never a finished product. We're always continually growing, adapting, changing, and that we should be seeking out the next best way to, whether that's to impart information, to train, to coach, or just being able to realize that, like, yeah, I have a good knowledge base, but that's not over. Like, you never stop learning type of thing is something I think is really important. Like, one thing that's on my to-do list every single day is, like, learn something new first thing in the morning. You wake up, do a little bit of nonfiction, and just, like, sit there and learn something new, because that, to me, helps me grow as a person day in and day out.
It's no secret that the people that get stuck within their ego are not out there searching for anything new, because I don't know, there's someone's law shows the graph where it says the more that you know, the more you realize you don't know. The more you go out into the world and get this information, the more you're like, whoa, there is a lot out there. There's a lot for me to know. There are so many of these, like, even just a different perspective on the same exact thing. So someone that's stuck within that has not, like, realized, oh, I should probably get out there and educate myself and figure out this kind of thing. And then that's how you can get stuck, because you think, okay, I'm living in this little bubble. I have 3 or 4 facts that work pretty well for me. I'm just going to stick to those. Because when you go out there and research, you're just like, oh, wow, there's a lot.
Again, I think back to coaching again, this example is that you have, this person who starts coaching, they might not know the technicalities of a movement, and then they start learning external rotation, placement of body parts. But if you can't relay that information on a very basic level, that knowledge base you have is essentially useless. And it becomes a skill now. Hey, you are a technically smart coach, but you cannot relate to the person. So in this instance, like your growth needs to be, how can I make this information readily available for the person I'm trying to explain this to? Or it goes in the opposite direction. You're really, really personable, but you have no knowledge base, and just recognizing like, hey, I can really I could sell someone anything, but I can't really go into the nitty gritty details. And you need to have a balance of both technical knowledge so you can help the person do whatever they're trying to accomplish, but you need to be able to relay that information in a way that makes sense to them. And that's a huge skill to be able to do that.
That's the exact representation of where your ego belongs. Your ego belongs within, you've prepared yourself, and now you have to go relay that information. As a coach, you have to go stand in front of a group of people and make it seem like you know exactly what's going on and you know exactly what the scale is for this person. They need that from you. That's where your ego belongs. But if your ego then makes it outside of that realm into you trying to have further education, or you're working with another coach and you're trying to help them and everything that they're doing is wrong, as opposed to maybe it's just different and you can help, like your ideas can combine. Like it's, we think back on, certain like hard and fast rules we had for certain movements, 5 or 6 years ago. I would say all of us as a company are more open to, how do we get that idea out there? How do we get that concept out there, but work with the athlete within, maybe their mobility or their skill set or, all these different things.
I mean, I think about that early on. If we had seen some of the movement and been like, that person's trashing their back, they're going to get hurt. Like, that's not the right way to train. And then you see that person put that into practice and you're like, all right, well, maybe my ego was too big. And I was so concerned with like, this is how so-and-so said it. This is how I'm going to teach it.
This is how Misfit Athletics does this.
Exactly. And being humble enough to be like, all right, well, I didn't think that was the best way to do legless rope climb. So that's the best way to do this movement. And all of a sudden you're like, well, they're faster than the way I teach it. And they can do it over and over again because they've practiced it. Maybe it's on me to be like, all right, well, I got to swallow this like uncomfortable like pill. Like I learned something I didn't know. And okay, now I have to be humble enough to say, okay, that should be the way you do this. Or you should try this. Or like you experiment with this, because that's the only way you truly know is if you try to do it for yourself or learn for yourself. And then at that point you could decide, all right, well, that worked. Or maybe I should do something different. Like that didn't work for me type of thing. But
yeah, in training, in practice, in preparation, I think that's when the ego needs to be checked, so to speak, so that you have that kind of that willingness and that openness to either experiment with new things, try to see things from a different perspective. But I think one thing that we in our community as well we could be better at is when it comes time to compete is exuding that confidence. Like I spent the last, four training cycles beating the crap out of myself every single day, feeling like death, feeling like I'm not making any progress. And now it's the open and like, now what? And they start performing and it's like, holy shit, like I am crushing it.
I think the open is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. And it's like maybe you had the appropriate mindset of like checking your ego during training, being willing to step back, being willing to kind of slow things down in order to speed them up later. But there is that time where you need to flip that switch and allow that ego to drive you through the wall, because you spent so long building that confidence, those, that ability up. And if you aren't willing to kind of walk around like, yeah, I fucking got this, then that's a mistake as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the basis for this entire conversation. Yeah. This entire episode is like, I know enough athletes that, my goodness, their humility, their lack of an ego drives their training to places that I can't even comprehend being able to do myself physically. Yeah. But then that same humility, has its way of rearing its ugly head during competition. And having that ability, having that, as a coach personally, being able to instill that in a person, being like, I say this on a regular basis to people, like if they, hey, you can do this. And then it's like kind of a sharp back at me, like, no, I can't. It's like, just so you fucking know, you are one of the best people in the entire world at something.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? You need to own that. I'm not the best in the entire world at anything. I'm pretty good at a lot of stuff, not even close to that realm.
Yeah.
Like, I can tell you right now that if I worked as hard as you, I would be out here ready to knock everyone's head off.
Yeah.
Like,
the ability to switch between kind of training and competing, that mindset is a learned skill. Like, you have to practice that. You have to be willing to, in training, occasionally flip that switch and be like, it's go time. Like, I know I'm capable of this, and I'm going to absolutely burn it down in this training piece, for example, or something like that. You have to be willing to go there so that when it comes time to turn that on for real, you've got it.
Yeah. And that's, we talk about, a lot of people get this idea that remote coaching is very specifically, you should be doing bar muscle ups instead of chest to bar in this workout.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that is the beginning. That is the foundation of what we're trying to do. Fix the movement, get the programming right. But I'm working with athletes right now that are on an extremely high level that they get almost exactly what we write for a program, and it is all about the notes on the side.
Yeah.
And one of the notes that I have is, you love every movement, every combination today.
Yeah.
Like, walk in the gym today like you own the place. And like, when you're in a ton of pain, laugh at it. Like, you have to have those days. You have to know that you can go there, because I mean, you're going out there and just getting beat up and just beat up and just beat up. You're literally beating yourself up on a daily basis on purpose. So to be able to have those days and go out there and have the like cock of the walk, like, should you act like that in your gym every day? Of course not.
Yeah.
But like, whether it's one training piece, whether, whatever it is, you have to be able to do that.
Yeah. Or with training partners too, especially if you're doing it on your own is one thing, but like Sherb and I, like, sometimes we'll go back and forth in just an affiliate class workout, and it's like, okay, like, it's on, like, we're going head to head here, and talk shit beforehand and like stare at each other during the workout. Like, where's he at? What's he going to do? And then at the end, it's, a high five and the ego's checked in again. So
I think the ego in that situation helps drive your intensity into a level that you maybe wouldn't otherwise. The joking, like the shame of, I don't want to be last type of thing really motivates you to really push. But at the same time, we've gone to the point in our training, not that we're anywhere near a high level anymore, but we understand there are certain parts to parse out as, this is something I need to work on. So you have the ego that pushes you to go really, really hard because you don't want to lose your buddy in the workout. But then you also have the other side of the coin where you go, all right, well, if it's biking and muscle ups, I'm good at the bike, you're good at muscle ups. Like, we should do the exact opposite strategy of what would give us the best score to get us the best training possible.
There's a really important part of this, though. You are both practicing humility and accepting the fact that you're working out against each other. Mm-hmm. That's people that get stuck in their ego. It seems like we're kind of flipping this upside down now. People that get stuck in their ego they're not going to train against each other. They're not going to create those scenarios.
Yeah.
So yes, you guys once again have made a non-ego driven decision to work out together, and then showtime, like middle finger up, hey, it's on. But you made that decision to go there. And that's what we see so many times is an ego is supposed to be, by definition, like self-worth and self-confidence. But we know that the people that present it in really confusing places don't have actual self-worth and self-confidence. And maybe they know that, and maybe they don't. A lot of people subconsciously, the very loud and boastful type person, where you're like, what are we arguing about right now? I'm confused. Like, what is this
I think
about?
that goes back to like what you were saying before, like people who come in the gym and it's like they exude that confidence in weird places.
Yes.
And that's to me just kind of a telltale sign of just a general lack of confidence, or maybe there's one part of, if it's training, for example, you come into the gym, there's one part that you feel really confident about, but you're not going to have to go up against somebody who's better than you at it. You're going to be just kind of training on your own. So there's no standard. Nobody's holding you to like a higher level or whatever. So you can walk around with that feeling, but hopefully, kind of like deep down, like it's just kind of bullshit. Like it's just on the surface.
Yeah. I mean, if we're trying to earn points towards self-worth and self-confidence, I can guarantee you there's some deep work associated with that.
Yeah.
And that's the type of work I think that people shy away from, that put out that sort of false confidence.
I think it's kind of weird just going on the same like element of remote coaching and having that person to reflect with about your ego and humility.
Morode coaching.
We get that dubbed in there, Ted.
With a lot of my athletes, I'm so unconcerned with their workout score, other than the fact that I want to make sure they got the intended stimulus of the piece, that the real bread and butter, and when we have conversations, it's not like, hey man, nice job, you did it 9 rounds or 9 minutes. Like, good. That's like not really what I care about. I want to know, did you pay attention to the notes and did you work on the one thing that you really want to grow on? And that's, for a lot of people, the hard part in training is, like you said, having the humility to be like, I know that if I bike really hard, I'm going to have the worst pull-ups in the world, but being okay with that and going, all right, well, I'm working on something, and seeing the long game is a huge part of, I think, the relationship you have, either coach athlete or, training partners. It's like, we're both working towards something, whether that's fitness, a competition, whatever. Like, we have bigger goals in that one workout, and being okay to be like, I'm focusing on this one thing for this one workout, but with a bigger picture in mind. That's something I think a lot of people lose sight of, and becomes literally I am that score that's on the board right now, and not I am someone who worked on something and I have bigger goals. They just attached their like self-worth to a number or to their ranking, which is I find a huge problem with athletes early on when they don't have that prior experience of worked with someone previously. Yeah,
there's kind of two things that I think of when it comes to ego and kind of self-development. And one is, you are either somebody who already is kind of known or respected in a certain area. So just say an affiliate coach, for example, the regular member sees you as somebody who knows a lot about CrossFit, about fitness, about movement, whatever. So you automatically have a level of credibility that just kind of comes with that title of coach. You still have to absolutely earn it, but in general, you probably kind of have that credibility. You can kind of throw that away by not listening or learning or trying to like develop with your athletes, or you can basically gain more credibility by asking questions and trying to learn from either athletes or coaches who might be considered like subordinate to you or have less knowledge. You put yourself kind of higher on that pedestal by putting yourself lower, if that makes sense. Asking somebody with less experience what they think of this, or having a conversation about it, not in a way that makes you not sound like you know what you're talking about necessarily, but that you're showing somebody that you are always trying to learn, and people recognize that, and therefore you continue to progress. The other side is like a willingness to fail and just like take that on the head and learn from that, and then just continue to progress from there. Both scenarios, you develop, you get better, and in general, and for the most part, both of them, people identify that and say like, oh wow, and give you more credibility as kind of the subject matter expert.
That's to me is some more of the fun part of being a coach too. Like, it's one thing to teach a thrust or teach a movement, but like to have a deeper conversation, to actually get to know the person and help them in a way that I think is a higher level skill for a coach, being able to relate and have those conversations, I really think is the fun part. Like, for example, coaching one of our classes here called Hatchet that has 3 pieces, like a lot of those athletes are a little bit more serious. They come to the gym more frequently. They're looking to get a little bit more out of training. It's fun to have a conversation. It doesn't involve like, this should be your row pace. It's like, you need to think about how you're moving here and how that relates to something else. And that higher level of thinking and that like deeper dive into, mindset or approach is, I think, where a lot of athletes are, start to see humongous changes, more so than just their body obviously changing. The mindset part of it is this part that a lot of people just don't pay attention to and just assume like, I'm just going to blindly follow this, whatever this says, instead of like taking a chance to reflect, which is something we stress on all the time with athletes. Like, you need to spend as much time outside of training thinking about what you did and what you're going to do next as you did doing the actual training to see the growth that you want.
I mean, what to go back to what you were talking about, for me, it's all about any time that I'm working with an athlete that I feel like has that false ego, the willingness to be vulnerable is just not there. They're not going to put out into the world like, I'm going to work really hard on this and I might still fail.
Yeah.
Like, their willingness to do something like that is exactly what's holding them back. And I think people need to realize that, I don't think everyone that's going to be listening to this is either going to be the person that has that gigantic ego that gets in their way and doesn't allow them to train, or the person that is like so humble that they train their butt off, but then can't put it into effect.
Yeah.
There's probably, a big spectrum when it comes to that. But if you are looking, if you're really willing to look in the mirror and try to find out specifically, like, what is holding me back? Like, why am I not able to progress here? There's a pretty good chance that you aren't willing to like start over in that sense of like, I'm going to put myself out there and I might not get the exact result that I want. Maybe I want to be the fittest person on earth, and that's just not in the cards for me.
Yeah.
And like, I told people that I wanted to be the fittest on earth, but now, it's scary to be vulnerable. It's scary to go into that thing. So I'm just going to keep doing exactly what I was doing, and I'm going to make excuses and all that. You have to be able to just kind of let go and say, I'm going to put myself out there. It's going to be an obvious declaration to people if you start training like a CrossFit Games athlete. Like, that's all you do. You train, you recover, you eat, you sleep. Like, that's kind of the whole game. So that's going to be put out there. So if you're going to go that far, you have to be willing to do that thing where you take who knows how many steps back just to take one step forward.
Yeah. That's like ground zero as far as like ego goes. If you're not willing to admit that, even if it's just privately to yourself, what either what your goal is, or where you see yourself going, or that you need to take a step back in order to take 2 steps forward. If you're not willing to do that even to yourself, that's like the absolute bottom barrier to entry to progressing. And if you don't have that, like, if you're not willing to admit that up front, then nothing else is gonna fall into place.
I was just say, personally, that's what's made training fun again for me. Like, I competed at a marginally decent level. Regionals was the kind of the apex of my fitness, and I really enjoyed competing at that. And then that was obviously not in the cards anymore, and I was like, oh, what am I training for other than just like health and longevity? And not having that like goal, whether that's individual or team, like not having that anymore is like, what am I training for? And it felt like kind of all over, like restarting almost. But then I went back and
became a competitor within like every single piece.
Yes.
You were trying to find that again.
Yeah. And I was trying to find that. And I found that a lot of times the ego led to me to be disappointed if I didn't do, if I wasn't the fittest in the group or whatever, if I wasn't doing that. And it is honestly poisonous. Like, it made training less fun because I was like, oh, my worth is that score. And that's not the case.
And now it's no fun for no reason.
Yeah. And now exactly, you're turning something that used to be enjoyment, used to be something you did for pleasure, and it becomes like a job. And that doesn't make training very fun. So when I was finally able to be like, all right, like, knock it off and pay attention to little things that you want to focus on. And you just look at things like our class workout today was rowing, burpees, and power snatches. Like, if humility, like, I probably should, maybe I should go a little bit slower on the first 2 so I can smash the last part. And that's what I would have done in the past. Now it's like the thing at the end is I'm good at. Like, do the things that you're not good at as hard as you can, and make that what your goal is today. And having micro victories rather than a macro view, I think helps a lot of athletes make that progress. And, it's a tough pill to swallow when you have that ego early on and you want to be the fittest in the class or fittest at whatever the workout is. But again, for me, it brought back that excitement of like, hey, there's something I'm not good at. And that's why I liked CrossFit to begin with, is that there were so many things I was terrible at. So it's exciting, and there's like lots of potential. There's a lot of things I can get better at, which is going to make me a fitter person, make me enjoy this, because there's, I like conquering a new skill or conquering a new movement. I have that again. It might not be like get your first muscle up, but now it's like, can you do 5 muscle ups after you bike at 1500 watts? That is now the new victory for me. And it's made training a lot more fun in the last like year or so than it had been in years past.
Kind of on the other side, we've talked a lot about the like willingness to kind of subordinate yourself to getting better at something. I think there's also a lot to be said about having the confidence, and whether it's confidence, ego, whatever, to see something that you've either never done before and say to yourself, like, I can figure that out.
Yeah.
Then kind of be like, I don't know, like, I'll be humble about this and take it slow. There's a lot of value in seeing something, whether it's in the gym or just learning a new skill. Like, it, I'll give you my example is like, I've done a bunch of like woodworking and even some painting lately, just kind of for fun. And I basically like see it something like on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, that's cool as shit. And I just say to myself, like, well, like, if YouTube guy can do this, like I can fucking do this. It
Right.
may not come out great, but I can do it. And if I practice it a bunch, then I'll get reasonably good at it. And then people at the gym come up to me and are just like, oh, that thing you like painted is really cool. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, oh, thank you. Like I appreciate it. I don't really know what I'm doing, but like
Putting yourself out there.
Just putting yourself out there and trying new things. And it doesn't take much. People kind of forget their beginner gains, like from the gym, you know, when you started training and you got really good really fast and started to taper off. That shit's real in most things in life, and it doesn't take too much, but maybe just a willingness to try and fail at something, but also with the mentality of like, if so-and-so can do this, like I can do this.
Well, what was super important about the way that you explained that is there was self-talk, both with the first example that you had and then with your own example. And I think that when you start to get into the mode of like this style of person that struggles with this is always the hardest worker. 9 times out of 10, always the hardest worker. But they're not willing to say to themselves, I can figure this out before they get started. And then after they do figure it out and they're on that stage, I can do this. Like I'm that good.
Yeah.
That self-talk is so important, and it's not an ego. It's not like, it's one of those things where we talk about the ego would be, I tried this skill once and I sucked at it and I'm done.
Right.
Like I'm the guy that figures stuff out super easy, and I don't want to, be like people to think that I'm like full of shit. Like, oh, well, I thought you were super athletic. Like what happened with that handstand ramp kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like that's where that issue becomes a thing. But you saying that you're going to figure it out and then trying it 10,000 times until you do figure it out, like that can teach you that, like your belief in yourself, your belief in the fact that you can do something can translate over all of these stages.
Yeah. I've like, this will kind of go off onto a little bit of a tangent.
That's the point of the show. Let's do it.
I have varying opinions on like college, public education and stuff like that.
Man,
and
you get me started, boy.
I told you. And if you think about it, this is not to, I don't want to insult anybody, but this is, if you take an honest look at it, this is kind of the way it is. There are really a very few number of professions in the world that seriously require like a higher level education. Like I do not want my doctor or my surgeon having learned what they learned on YouTube, like straight up. Okay. Or
cheap though.
Or having gone to, MIT Tech, ITT Tech. But
Holiday Inn Express.
Yeah, Holiday Inn Express. So like doctor, lawyer, engineer, that kind of thing. Yeah, a lot of education.
Geez,
but there
you have
are
an engineering
so
degree and you're a
many.
CrossFit
Yeah, I'm just
coach.
saying. But a CrossFit coach, like you didn't go to school for sports science. Seth didn't. You did. I didn't.
I'm a sucker.
Idiot. And I think we're all definitely some of the most knowledgeable in the world. In the world on strength and conditioning. But
Believe in
that
yourself.
is just
That's
from
what we're talking about.
that's exactly what it was. It was from learning stuff either online, going to seminars, listening to other people, and the same thing can be applied to like your life and just things that you want to get better at. It with the information available nowadays with the internet, there is such an unlimited number of ways that you can learn how to do something that you want to do that there's just no excuse anymore. How often do you have people at work who are just like, hey, do you know how to do this? And you just turn on your computer and then just go to Google and are just like, how do you do this? And then you're just like,
yep,
I
do know how to do that.
I do know how to do that. Here's how you do it. Just like people, maybe they don't give themselves enough credit, or it's just not like kind of that mindset of like, I can figure this out. I don't know how to do it. Okay, where do I go to figure it out? Like, there's almost nothing you can't figure out how to do on your own.
It's funny, the school thing is like the perfect like explanation of my growth in terms of, having the ego, not having the ego. I was always the kid who like, because I didn't want to do the work, would be like, well, I mean, I can get an A most of the time without doing anything.
Right.
But like, I had to, when I was younger, hold on to that fact. Like, I couldn't let someone see me studying because then, I thought of myself as like a hypocrite.
Oh, I thought you were the guy who fucking didn't study
I'm
and
the
still did
hypocrite
good.
that's like hiding in the bathroom studying or whatever.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point when you get to college and you're in those engineering classes, like you can try to be that guy and they say a word you've never heard before, and like good luck conjuring that up from your brain.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to happen. Like, and I still had issues with that, with the education system and whatnot, but like the message would be to someone that's still struggling with that ego thing, and it doesn't have to be in relation to CrossFit, it can be in relation to anything. If you're still struggling with that, like people are going to relate to your humility if you just let go of that shit. They really will. They're not going to think you're full of shit. They're not going to be like, oh wow, he's he always talks about how dumb it is to run more than 20 feet. Like that's one of the jokes that like CrossFitters have, the 400 meter sticker, the bumper sticker, instead of the 26.2. Love it. It's probably better for your health. Anyways, that idea of
you need a 50 meter run.
If you saw that guy out there going for like a long run, you wouldn't be like, "Thought you said you weren't going to get better at this." You'd be like, "Oh, that's awesome. Like imagine how fit you're going to be now. You got like this side of the coin figured out. Now you've kind of let go of that image, and you're going to let yourself do that. Like you can go there. You can do that. You can get training partners and you can lose to them day after day after day. And if you work your butt off, there's a pretty good chance that at some point, because you were vulnerable, you're going to kick their ass, and then you're actually going to have an ego."
Yeah, I think the one of the biggest things that CrossFit has given me is we try to become really good at a lot of things, and I try to like kind of extrapolate that into life, like try to CrossFit life, try to learn a bunch of new things, try to read books that I previously didn't have any interest in, try to learn something that I, in the military, I would say painting isn't necessarily something that you are just like raring to talk to your Marine soldiers about, whatever, like, "Hey guys, I was painting the other night and it was so de-stressing. It was great." But the things that you learn from trying new things can be extrapolated into other parts of your life, like in a huge way, and just
the saying is the this is a place for the humbled and those who are about to be. Like that this type of building is going to humble you.
Yeah.
Or like we've had people that were like freak athletes come in and be like, "Okay, so I've done this other sport and I was world class at it, and I happen to live in the same area, and I've heard about you guys training CrossFit Games athletes or whatever," and they will come in and just
get buried.
Well, they like bury themselves. It's like doing burpee pull-ups as if like this workout's going to be 10 seconds long and it's like 40 minutes long. You're like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And they do not come back.
Yeah.
They're not okay with being humbled. They hate being humbled, and their ego's so large that they've had such success that they're not willing to restart almost.
Yeah, that sport that you were world class at, did you wake up that way?
Yeah,
like
you didn't play it your whole life growing up to this point, and all of a sudden you decided you were going to be done, and now you can just walk into whatever else you want and just be the best at it. Like that's not the case. And it's funny, you guys were talking with like the higher education stuff. Like I have a slightly different path than everybody else here. I got my undergraduate degree in a school that was very rigorous, and I think
this is important. Sherb has a persona here at Misfit Athletics. Sherb attended the #1 rated private institution, non-Ivy League. Actually, those might all be.
I don't know what the standard.
It was voted the #1 private institution in Forbes magazine. Big Red over here went to that school. So, every once in a while, if we can throw him a bone, be like, "Hey."
So what I was going to say is that like, I graduated from that school, thankfully, got through. And then I looked at myself and I said, "What the hell am I going to do? Like, I have a psychology and Chinese degree. What the hell am I going to do?" And my professor was like, "Why don't you like move to China and like sell paint or something? You know how to talk to people
and sell paint."
I swear to God that I said the real thing. It was on the list.
You should be our connection for ST.
But I decided, I like the physical, output. I like the people who are active. I like that style of things. I like coaching. I like teaching. So I was like, all right, I'll get my master's degree in this sector. So that I did. And when I got there, I realized that one of the problems with higher education is the ego of the institution and the field that they're in. They think a very specific way, and they are very, very behind the times when it comes to adjusting to new information.
Those books you've shown me. Make
Some
sure
of the
you
books,
have a bagel and drink like a gallon of juice before
yeah, once you drink
exercise.
like a gallon of OJ before you go for a marathon run. But like again, that's their thing. What was nice about it though is I had a chance to look at something and be like, I am not gonna be like this institution. I am willing to try new things, try new ideas, be willing to say like, hey, I can get strong by not doing 5 sets of 3 at 70 to 71.5% because that's what the CSCS says. Like, that's great. That is good information. They have great information for you to learn from, but don't let that be your only input. Like, be willing to seek out other people. And that's what's really cool about CrossFit early on is that like, hey, we don't know how to row. We don't know how to swing kettlebells. We're not the experts. Like, let's get the experts to teach us. So when I was there, I had the opportunity to realize that like, just taking things for granted or just taking because someone said so in a book, like that's the only way you can do stuff. I looked at that and go, all right, well, I don't really feel that way. And that was my ego being like, I know better than this. But then I look back at it and I go, all right, well, what was cool about it is that it gave me the opportunity, it gave me the fire to learn something new. And then also be like, all right, well, I think I figured it out. Maybe I haven't figured it out. I got to go find some other resource or find some other time. And what was really nice about grad school is that it afforded me this opportunity because they assume that most students are also working in whatever field they want to be getting into. I had a lot of time to grow, make mistakes, fuck up, fix it, do it again as a CrossFit coach. And, I don't think I would have had the opportunity to come work here or be a coach in CrossFit coach in the state of Maine and work with Misfit Athletics had I not had that opportunity for 2 years to essentially fuck up a bunch and learn how to be better at what I'm doing and looking at the institution and going like that. I don't want to have that type of ego and then learning from that, all right, being humble, but also being willing to seek out the truth is what we're looking for here. And I think that was an excellent opportunity. So, sometimes we joke about like having a master's degree here and I'm the only one here with one, but like maybe my degree specifically itself doesn't relate to it, but it gave me an opportunity to learn about myself.
Yeah, I think it's Mark Twain. The mark of an educated mind is being able to entertain a thought without accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're either that person that's so like any new idea that comes in, you're like, no, I already have the answer. Or you're that person that believes every single thing that they read. Can you go into something, all into something and, either read it and kind of understand where they're coming from and then not put it into your practice, or maybe you pull little pieces out. Like there seems to be like that thing where your mind is either like, this is right or this is wrong.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. I'm going to get you all fired up. But just and it.
Do you have a master's degree?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
I might not either.
I thought you got mad. Wait, didn't you like not pay a parking ticket and you don't have one?
I don't have the physical copy. I do have a master's degree. I still haven't paid that parking ticket.
How much did it cost?
$12 or something.
No. How much did your master's degree cost?
Oh, $50K. Some stupid amount.
I paid $12.
Fuck you. I'm not gonna keep
I'm giving you another $12
for you, Bloomsburg. I ain't giving it to you.
But
That's
just
awesome.
the mindset of kind of our culture and society right now, especially, is there's a very stark dichotomy: right, wrong,
I'm this.
left, right. I'm here, you're
Everybody
there.
wants that. It's more reassuring to have the right answer or wrong
it's
answer.
it's easier to know right or wrong. But I think if you get somebody in a room and are having a conversation with them, somebody who you thought was so far opposite of your opinion, that's not actually the case. And with your example, you have to remember the people who are writing those books, like the sports science or psychology, whatever books on fitness, are not writing that with like malintent. Like there's still valuable information to be taken from those people, whether you agree with them or not. If you are completely shutting people out who have different opinions from you, you're effectively just cutting off your own ability to grow.
If you think that they're closed-minded and you don't want to be a part of what they're doing, and then you act in the exact same way, how are you furthering this? How are you bringing people together?
I was just going to say, in the higher institutions, like I agree, the person that wrote the book didn't be like, hey, fuck these guys, I'm going to write whatever I want and they'll follow what I say. Like they wrote it with an intent, like hey, I want to educate other people. The problem then becomes within those institutions, they want to make things, like you said, right or wrong. So they say, this is the only way it's going to be taught, rather than like I feel like I'm just like imagining in my mind, you have the days of like Plato, Socrates, all these philosophers who would just literally go on walks and talk to people about what their thoughts were. That's what I feel like education should be for a lot of people, is hey, let's have an open discussion about what do you guys think is the best way to get someone strong, not this is the only way you can do it, which is what unfortunately happens in our specific sector is like, this is the only way you can get strong. And I've read those books and it says the only way to make your muscles bigger is if you do sets of 12. That's the only way you can do it. And we've proven, when I would say proven, we've seen it in like practice that you can do small sets, you can do big sets, you can do lightweight, you can do heavyweight, moderate weight, you can mix it up with cardio, which back
reps
in the day
equal
was,
size.
Yeah, exactly. So they were like, all they were saying is that like, this is the only way you can do it. And we've shown a different way. And the only thing I would like to see a higher education do would be have more of those philosophical, conversations where it's like, what do you guys think is this? And do you have any information to back up your claim rather than just this?
Harvard Business School is case studies only. The master's program or whatever it is, that business school, they do case studies in groups. There's no tests, there's no papers, there's no nothing. It's like, let's dig into like these real world situations and figure out what best practices are.
And I feel like I had one professor in grad school that was like that. It was a conversation. He was a big creatine researcher. So it was nice to talk about something that I had some information about. And it was more of a, hey, let's just chat about getting strong, or let's chat about this. And then the other ones were like, this is the only way. So there are, for me, that's what I'd hope all my classes would be, that Harvard business style, where it's just like, let's have a conversation. Let's learn from each other and look at other real world examples, not just here's what someone wrote in 1970 and now we just accept it as the truth. Like,
yeah, but if you got paid 6 figures to make a PowerPoint one time and throw it up on the screen year after year, you know what I'm saying?
That's a pretty good gig, I'd say.
Yeah, there's I think there are very few things like in life on Earth that are bound by physical and natural laws. Like gravity's a real thing.
A lot of it goes back to what you talked about, doctors and
it's like science. There a lot of in this like sciences and mathematics. There are certain things that are because they are. That is just
we think they are what they are.
Yeah, I guess we think they are, but with outside of that. What do we actually know? Like, what's to say that 20 sets of 10 isn't actually the gold way to get as strong as humanly possible? Like, you don't know that. Like, and you have no idea what kind of things impact others and what happens when you try different things out. And it all kind of comes back to that ego and having a willingness to say like, what if this is the way to do it? What if what I think right now is actually completely ass backwards and is completely wrong? Do you have the willingness to say, like, yeah, that could be the case. Like, sure, give it a shot. Try something different. There are not that many things that are completely bound by law, and just a willingness to try something different or accept that you might not be right.
Yeah, and the example that I'm thinking of, and I'm hoping that I'm not only thinking of this because I'm on this side of the fence, not from you, but from being on the side of coaching versus the person that's actually doing the programming. You have to be following a terrible, terrible, terrible program to blame the program for your outcome.
Oh yeah,
like we've gotten to a point now where our main competitors, like the people that had really wacky ideas that did weird shit, I don't hear their names anymore.
I've caught them by the way.
Because there are no, I don't care if it's cheesy. There's just no gimmicks. There's no magic way to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Like 10 by whatever, 400 meter run. That's not it's not easy. There's there's nothing like, you can't look at it and say this is genius programming. And you can't look at it and say, if I go out and just jog really slowly this many times, that it's going to work for me. I think everyone kind of accepts that. And we've gotten to the point where there's a lot of people that are good at writing Metcons. Like the strength stuff is not super challenging to write. So like if we're looking at this and you're like maybe the program hopping kind of person, there's a pretty good chance that you have to find a way to find that balance of the ego. Like,
yeah,
I got to kind of take it easy on like trying to figure out what the easiest way is for me to get there.
Right.
And just accept the fact it's going to be really hard.
What you're actually asking is how can I get as good as possible while doing the minimum amount of work possible?
Right. You don't want to admit it to yourself.
Asking. Yeah. You don't want to admit that. You don't want to admit that you don't want to work for it. You want the program to work for itself. You want to just put yourself in one end and come out the other and have the program work for you.
And we all do it somewhere in our life. There's somewhere in our life where we're like, I don't want to deal with this shit. I want to find the easiest possible way. And it's always so short-lived. You find something and you're like, this is the answer. I found it. This is the thing. I'm going to do it half-assed and I'm going to be great.
Yeah.
And then you're like, no, damn it. Turns out you just got to do this thing that you want to get better at until you're better at it.
Yeah, I look at that and I see one of two paths. You're either trying to do something that's not worth doing because it's so easy and that's the route you want to go. Like, I just feel like someone's like, oh, I'll just do this one time and all of a sudden I'm good at thrusters or good at this, good at that. And we hear athletes talking about tricks with movements and then you go, oh, wait, no. The reason you're actually good at that is because you've put the work in and you realize the things that are actually worth attaining or worth wanting require effort. And if they don't, they're probably not worth going after. And I just feel like if you were really looking for self-growth, you look for challenges. And that's the type of athlete that I like to work with, is someone that is excited by, oh shit, I suck at that. Like, that's an exciting thing. I now have something to work on, not just, oh, poor me, I can't do this and someone's fitter. Like, well, if you want to accept that truth, that's obviously your prerogative, but I want you to have the ambition to be like, fuck that, I did terrible. Well, good. I found something to work on. Like, I have an athlete competing this weekend and he's like, oh, all these tests are sprints. And I said, good. He's like, what do you mean good? I'm like, we've been working on sprinting in that high gear for so long. It's time to show the hard work that you've been putting in. Like, this is an opportunity to see what you have. Don't be discouraged by the test. Be encouraged by the opportunity to be like, all right, well, it's time to prove to myself, prove to everybody around me that I've been putting in work these last 3 years at something I'm not very good at. And now is a chance. And that to me is what you have to be proud about.
You don't want a wide open layup to get you to the CrossFit Games, and then when you get there, Joel Embiid's waiting for you at the rim. You know what I'm saying? Like
one of those poor 9-year-olds.
You really don't want that to happen to you.
No.
That's not a good feeling. You don't want that T-shirt. You don't want to show anyone that T-shirt because they're like, shit, you were there? I didn't know you were there. That's cool, man, I guess.
You buy that Vendor Village?
Hunter, final thoughts. What do you got for us?
Oh, man. So I don't remember who said it. I think it might have been Einstein. Basically, that every person's a genius, but if you expect a fish to climb a tree, he's going to look like an idiot. I butchered the shit out of that. But
I was listening to a book this morning where it said, do you think Einstein would be embarrassed if he was on your basketball team and he sucked? So that's a weird coincidence.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So
I'm so confused over both statements.
So
it's the same thing. Same idea.
Just the idea is if you basically need to be willing to find out what you're good at. And this goes beyond training. You have to be willing to try and fail a lot more times than you're going to be able to try and succeed. And just that the ego is kind of the driver of that. Are you willing to try something that's outside of your comfort zone and maybe find out that that is what you are like meant to do, or what you excel at? How do you know you're not the world's greatest historian if you've never picked up a history book and like read it and been like, holy shit, this is super interesting and it makes a lot of sense and I'm just gonna it takes off from there. I don't know, weird example, but the point is that I think everybody has something that they can be exceptional at. You have to have that ego, the mindset, the willingness to try, fail, succeed.
As someone who's battled ego quite a bit, both growing up and like just in the recent memory of CrossFitting, like I've definitely battled that myself. The biggest thing I can say to all of you out there is take a step back from what you're doing and do not be so obsessed with the outcome. Be obsessed with the process. Look for things that challenge you and accept them, and understand that before you have a good time, there are going to be a lot of times where you're not having good times. But you look at that and say, all right, I got a little bit better at this, and that little bit of incremental growth, or finding the things that you're not good at and seeking them out and working to get better at them, I find to be way more rewarding than that one quick instance of that quick reward of I get to write my name on the board, or I get to tell my friends I got this time on a workout. Seek the long game and don't play the short one, which is something that I've come to realize in the last couple of years here, as going from trying to be more competitive to more of the recreational CrossFitter, is that even though I'm not competing at the high level anymore, I still find a lot of joy in looking at something going, I'm not very good at that. Why don't I take that head on, and being okay with struggling?
We'll just close with the concept of, now that we've had this entire conversation, where do you land on this spectrum? Do you work your butt off and then you get really nervous when you're going to compete? Or do you shy away from really hard work and just hope you can kind of yell and, perform and
The adrenaline
put on
power
this
you
whole
to success.
show, to get you there? And if you're on, the side of not believing in yourself when it comes time, find ways throughout your day and your week and your month and your year to prove to yourself that you are making progress, and acknowledge that. Every single victory that you have, you need to acknowledge that exists. The affirmations, stuff like that, it works really well. You're gonna, if you say it and you work hard, you're gonna start really believing it. If you say, I can do this, I am good at this, I have worked my butt off, and I'm gonna put it all out there the best that I can, that stuff will actually work. And if you're that person, and this is the side that I identify more with, if you're that person that's, kind of full of shit about your abilities, you're not a hypocrite. You're not, fake if you shed that and really go in and try to get better. People will identify with your authenticity, with your vulnerability. People want to connect. They're just scared, just like you, to be able to do so. Put yourself out there. You'll get the rewards from it, whether they're personal or, accolade driven. Like, find out where you live on that spectrum and try to work on it.
Agreed.
Good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was episode 2 of the Unprepared Podcast by Misfit Athletics. Want to give a special shout out to the people that gave us feedback last week. Thank you very much for your comments and your likes and your subscriptions and all that good stuff. If you like what we're doing, please get out on social media and on YouTube and on the podcast app, all that good stuff. Let us know that you like what we're doing, or some feedback. Or one thing that could be cool with this show is leaving some comments about what topics you guys want us to tackle.
Agreed.
That would be great. We will see you next week with the Misfit Project.